Okay, thank you everybody for joining us on another episode. Today I have my friend Zach Ledford from Eljun LLC. The company has taglines of zeal, strength, and wisdom. And I just told Zach I think you guys should put in built to serve in there because just knowing you as a person, I think you've really built something here that is going to be around for the long term. I thought we could share with our audience today a little bit of a backstory about how you made a post very recently on LinkedIn that went crazy viral. And you were, I think, 7 years old at the time when you wrote to Lego, the company that makes the blocks that we all love and probably played with as kids. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that story and how that came to be?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it's something that like after it kind of blew up as of this morning, it was around like 8 million views,
Wow.
something crazy,
All
like
organic.
100%. Yeah.
Wow.
Just put together, found it in storage, still have a copy of it sort of sitting here. So
Hey,
there it
it's
is,
real.
right? Yeah, there's a tangible thing there, right? I've got the color copy in storage, like in a document protector and a binder still.
Wow.
That one's just for me for right now, so I've left that where it is. But I'm keeping this other one in my home office because it's a good reminder. But yeah, give you a little bit of background on it. 7 years old, massive Lego fan. Have a couple older brothers and inherited some stuff from them in
Hmm.
the late '80s, early '90s. So going back a little bit of a ways. But I was super into it, right? I would keep catalogs, had a bunch of sets. Everything was like extremely well organized. So it wasn't just this letter that went in document protectors. Like I kept instructional booklets and stuff like that there too. I was a fun kid.
Wow.
But I was really impressed with them around like 7 years old back in the mid '90s, and I was like, looking at the catalogs and what they had going on, I was like, I'd really like to be able to work with these guys, right? I love the stuff that they're doing. It's all super cool. If it's cool to play with them, it's probably even cooler to like help design them and work with the people who are doing it. So I wrote them a letter and I asked them for a job. Um, and they wrote me back and they wrote me back. Right. And this is in the days where, it's write a letter out by hand, put it in an envelope, mail it off and just kind of wait and see what happens. Right. So I remember doing that, being super excited and kind of thinking I probably won't hear anything. I mean, it's Lego, right?
Right.
They're huge. Even back then, it was multinational corporation. But they did. They wrote me back from the offices in Connecticut, sent it all the way back to a military base we were living on in Germany. So, right. So this is a
Wow.
transatlantic communication. Yeah. And I kept it, right. And so you can look at that post on LinkedIn. It's kind of where I posted it out. It had a huge impact on me. There's a lot of content in there. I think that I kind of bring to the table today, and that's kind of stuck with me after 25 years
Right.
plus. But I mean, they gave like real practical advice, like about different education programs to look at, some of the skill sets maybe that would be necessary, other things to consider in terms of like general career progression.
Yeah. No, I really love that story because two biggest takeaways for me were one, a business that size took the time to write to a 7 year old kid and make him encouraged or encouraging him to pursue education, of course, which is important, but then also, take the time to like serve a customer really at the end of the day. Like the customer is the kid. Yes, the parent bought the Lego perhaps or whatever, but like they still are helping serve their customer by writing you that letter. And to me, that's just a really good value added proposition as a business. And I know things like that you're trying to also establish with Elgin. So I'm wondering like if we can talk a little bit about, if you don't mind telling me about, how you've helped build certain projects at different companies. One of them comes to mind is like SpaceX is one of them, and how that kind of led to you forming business like Elgin, and what you're setting out to do. So just walk us a little bit through the history.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll say that in some ways you can say it started with something like this Lego letter and some of the things that I took away from that and stuck with me, right? Like a sort of customer obsessed sort of mentality,
Yeah.
right? Never discounting somebody's interest or problem or saying like I don't have time for that right now. There's always time, always, and that's important, right? We're in the business at Elgin of kind of working in the human resources and shared services space, specifically with technology, and so by nature that is a people business, right?
Mm.
And so putting people first and really focusing on that piece of it, I think is really a defining feature of Elgin, right? True, we're a technology company. True, we're extremely adept at doing like analytics, statistical analysis, machine learning, integrations, all that good stuff, right? But that's the mechanics. That's the underpinning piece. The important part are people, the problems and issues they see every single day, and how you can kind of overcome those things, right?
Right.
That's what we're in business to do. And so we have done that, in a couple different sort of contexts. We've done things to simplify workflows between, like a human capital management system and a payroll system, sort of like end to end, ground up total rebuild to get those things in sync, and did it in like 10 days, right, with two people. And that's using sort of the core technology, the center of all of it. So integration platform as a service, iPaaS technology,
Mm-hmm.
specifically with SnapLogic. Uh, so put that in context. If you tried to do that without that kind of platform, without our expertise, it's not going to take you 10 days. That's going to take you probably several months
It's
to
so funny
do.
you mentioned SnapLogic, right? Which is also a platform that uses sort of the building blocks technology, snaps, which we call them. They're no different than like Lego pieces. A lot of times I've trained people on our product in less than, 6 hours on 1 day trainings. And what we're doing is really essentially connecting blocks that are systems, that are, individual components that we call snaps. They're obfuscating the code in the back, and you just connect them together, and all of a sudden you have a workflow, no different than if you were to build a stack of Legos and have a building or whatever. And it's so funny to me to see like that translate, all these years later now into your life and your business. You're using a technology that's kind of like Legos, but now it's for data transformation and data integration, and now you're, building a business with it, which is fantastic. I just wanted to point that out. But walk back with me a little bit about, like, you mentioned people, right, are the real main part of this. And oftentimes, especially with, things like COVID when they hit and a lot of folks got laid off, businesses still had to run. But I remember in previous conversations you and I have had, you mentioned that people are really what are overlooked most of the times when it comes to businesses. Can you tell me a little bit about what that means, and kind of how you see that in your perspective?
Sure. I mean, so I think like HR has historically done a very good job contextualizing like maybe some of the squishier qualitative aspects around people, right? Like you want to be happy, that drives retention, people first, and that kind of a thing, right? As like a value set. From a business perspective and bottom line component, though, typically what's sort of ignored is how to actually do something with people data and the people in your organization in a way that's monetized, or is something that sort of happens in the conversations at the C-suite, right? So like when I was in business school getting an MBA, you take a managerial accounting class, and I remember it, as if it was yesterday. Professors talking about the highest operational expense a business is going to face. The highest one is the operational expense for labor, right? It's your people. That's where
Right.
the majority of your expenses are coming from. And so we all sort of internalize that, and we're like, okay, makes sense. And then he literally turns the page. He's like, all right, now let's talk about logistics management and accounting, right? Like raw materials and iron ore production or
Just
something. And I'm like,
overlook that completely.
yeah. And we're like, wait, I remember it's like, hey, like, why aren't we talking about, that's the number one thing. Why aren't we talking about that? Like, why are we talking about iron ore? Like, what are we
Mm,
doing? And it was because the conventional wisdom is that you really don't have, there's nothing to talk about, right? You want to control for that. You're either terminating people, you're firing them, or you're lowering wages, or you're trying to swap out, talent for somebody who costs less or is outsourced, or whatever it is, right? So you have like one or two levers. That's been the conventional wisdom. It's not true. It's not true, especially in the modern context. There's a lot of other things you can do with predictive analytics, machine learning, taking your people data, merging with your operational data and your business data. Like this is the lifeblood of your business, right? And you have a way to, in a very real sense, impact the bottom line by pulling a couple of different levers, right? The days of just sort of firing people and saying like that's as good as we can do, thanks for playing, there's the door. Those days are over, and they need to stay that way. There's other ways and better ways to do it. At Eljun, we take pride in being able to help guide your business to that point, to show you how to do it.
right. Talk to me a little bit about the differentiation between automation and also then what Elgin provides, because I think there's a little bit of this. I wouldn't say it's unspoken fear, but I think people do contemplate about, well, is automation going to make my job disappear? And am I going to become completely useless? Are these businesses going to just become a bunch of robots doing all the processing? Then why do they really need me? And, kind of talk to me about where does automation kind of play into what Elgin offers a business? And then, of course, how maybe that's not just the only piece, that's just the beginning of it. and kind of the value that you can help businesses extract?
For sure, it's a really good question, right? So there is an automation component, right? There are frequently times when systems aren't talking to each other, they're in a
Mm,
non-integrated state, and someone is doing data entry like copying and pasting something that they literally just did over somewhere else, right? It happens all the time. Like
right.
that is
It's
a
surprising you'd be, 2020, we're sitting here, but that's actually what some people's jobs are, is to literally copy and paste stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and it's one of those things like no one likes to do that job, right? It's tedious. It is high stress because particularly in the HR space, if you don't get that data copy or that data entry correct, system to system, there are enormous potential
Right.
repercussions as a second, third order
So
effect,
human error,
right?
first off, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it carries enormous risk, both for that individual, but for the business as well, right? Like if you mess up something like employment verification, or you screw up some data entry as part of onboarding or getting something into payroll, like that is a
Mm,
huge problem, both for you, for the business, and also your employees, right? So our philosophy is like, let us help remove processes like that, the mundane things that candidly machines are better at doing, so that you have time to focus on the things that machines can't do, right? Have planning and having conversations with the lines of business, right? Having difficult conversations with employees, putting efforts into succession planning or career motility, making sure that your diversity inclusion efforts look like the way that they should, right? Look, understanding what's going on with the workforce. Are they engaged? Are there opportunities for improvement? Can you work with your people analytics function or industrial operations engineers, if you have that concept in your business, to really perfect what people are doing,
mm.
sort of like that really drive the core piece of the business? That's what we want to help you to do, right? So we're not there to have a robot take your job. We're there to have a robot take the parts of your job that you hate,
Right.
so that you can focus on the things that you like and that you're good at.
Right. So essentially, is Elgin's taking where a company is today, where their technology is today, integrating that, making sure the mundane stuff is taken out by automating it, through iPaaS, but then really setting up companies to derive value from that insightful data that they can, finally use to do things like we just talked about, which is, help with the people management, making sure is your staff productive and happy with their lifestyle and the job that they're doing, so that way your company strives to be better if the employees are better. Like it's all one commingled system. It's not separate. People aren't separate from business. It's all in the same, right? So it's a very good thing to kind of highlight, I think, with Elgin, is that no, it's not just an integration and an automation service. This is really looking at the bigger picture of things, and making sure that your business is set up for long-term success, not just the immediate need. And I think it's hard not to talk about it during COVID times. I'm curious, like, how has that maybe brought up more in your perspective? I can definitely talk about in automation's perspective of companies that hadn't spent the investment automating certain things struggled a bit more than those who did spend that time earlier on. So how does kind of what we've seen in COVID, or through this pandemic, so to speak, how has that helped? Or what I'm really trying to figure out, how is that given Elgin that understanding of what people need better or more, and even maybe faster now than ever before. If there's anything that you can say about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think everybody's been impacted one way or another, right? The big takeaway for a lot of people and a lot of businesses is that cloud technologies, remote work, these are not optional things.
Mm,
They're not going anywhere, right? I think they're here to stay. So there were things that that we were out there proselytizing, well before, and we're not alone, but well before anything happened here, and it was sort of like, hey, go shelter in place and quarantine, right? But businesses are just sort of like, oh, what we have works well enough, right? We're just going to go ahead and keep on doing it,
mm,
maintain status quo, right? That's a basic human element, is to sort of resist change, right? Um, it's not really possible anymore. So in that context, right, we're a cloud native company. We from inception have had our entire support staff work remotely, 100%. There is no corporate headquarters office building somewhere. Like, it's people with laptops, right? Because we believe that that's the way of the future. So much so that we've organized ourselves that way. But we bring that mindset, that attitude to a customer who has maybe not invested in some of those things as early as they could have, but really need to make that happen now, right? And I talked to a client a couple of weeks ago, and she's, in a business that's 100 years old. They're still using a typewriter for certain functions.
Wait,
So
what?
correct. So when, yeah, right. So
What are they doing for? They're like printing labels? What are we talking about here?
when they want to like add something to a hard copy document from like 10 or 15 years ago or longer, they're literally like, it's
Gotcha.
faster to put it into a typewriter, type the date, than it is to scan it and do something. Um,
Interesting. Wow.
so she's at home with her laptop, right? That's how I was talking to her. It's like, video conference. And she's like, and here's my typewriter that I had to bring home with me as well, is because she couldn't go to the office. And there's no way to circumvent that particular business process yet.
Wow.
And that same kind of thing, right? Like you kind of look at it in disbelief, but in a lot of ways, companies have made that same kind of a choice by not doing some of the investment in technologies, even over the last 10 years,
Mm,
right? Um, Having data that's primarily shared through spreadsheets or emails, to me, from my perspective, that is like a half step away from typewriter territory. It's almost the same thing. Thematically, it 100% is. There's so many ways to streamline, automate, interconnect, do it in a way that's validated, controlled, and secured. It's crazy not to. I'll call out too that there's two things in particular that Elgin's really good at. One is we don't create HR software. Like, I'm not going to try to sell you a human capital management system or a payroll system or timekeeping system. We come with the attitude that you've picked the systems that you have in place for a reason. We're going to help you maximize the utilization of all of those individual pieces as standalone products, but then holistically, comprehensively, so that
right.
in total, right, the sum is greater than, or the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Whatever that
Hmm.
expression is. Really bad at at
No,
recalling
I think you
those.
make a valid point because it's like you could have the best in technology. You could have the best software, for human capital management, for whatever. But at the end of the day, are you able to get the value that your executives need to make decisions out of it? Are you able to get, business to be more productive, more effective because of those tools? Of course, in the short term, yes, you're able to have a system of record at the baseline, but then where do you go from there? The interconnectedness of the enterprise is kind of where the bread and butter of something like SnapLogic, plays in, of course, and of course with Elgin helping companies do that, and then take it a step beyond where you're not just integrating, you're looking at what's the actualized value. Going back to what you said earlier with respect to COVID and all, if a business is just looking at what do I need to do today to just keep functional, which is I think in a lot of business uh, mindset is the commonality theme. It's like, hey, how do I survive this quarter, this month, this week, this day, even, right? Like, depends on how big or small your business is. You're generally just looking at it in that way. And I would argue, yeah, perhaps you have to look at it that way if you have to just decide, what needs to be done immediately, especially when something like this happens from out of left field where, there's a pandemic. But
Sure.
let's not wait till the next pandemic till you call Elgin, right? It's like, let's start really thinking about what just took place in a much bigger way and set ourselves up for, potentially this happening again in the future. I don't think this will be the last time that we go through something like this as humanity, especially, it's only 2020. You and I have a little bit more life to live, and I think we're going to experience probably more of these in the future. So, how do we get ourselves acquainted with what the services you're offering is? And is there anything you can tell me right now I can share with this audience on where they can find Elgin and get in touch with Zach? Of course, LinkedIn is one. Now that you've gotten
Yep.
a little bit more favorability on there, that's fantastic. So tell the audience a little bit about how they get in touch with you and what they can expect to start.
Yeah, for sure. So absolutely can find me on LinkedIn. So Zachary Ledford. There's Eljun LLC.com. That's ELJUN LLC.com. And there's, contact us sort of forms and ability to even just schedule a call, right?
Yeah,
And we'll get back to you within 24 hours and get something going, right? Our general approach is come to us and start a conversation, right? We're going to gauge where you are, see if there's something that maybe we can help you out with, and sort of, gauge fit. Um, but it's just a conversation, right? Same thing
that's
I
where it
used to
all
do.
starts.
Yeah, 100%. It's like, what do you have going on? What's top of mind? Maybe you reached out for a reason. You're curious. There's a specific pain point, and we just kind of take it from there. And if it doesn't look like it'll be a good fit, there's been times where we've said to a potential customer, right, who's done this outreach, like they're like, hey, I really want to go down this route. This is what I want to do. And we maintain that we're like, we don't agree with that evaluation, that position. Here's why. We'd recommend you don't do that. And they said, I want to do it anyway. Can you guys help me do this thing? And we told them no. We turned down the contract, turned down money, which is probably sounds crazy for a startup.
But you got to stay in your lane. You got to stick with what you believe in at the end of the day, right? Like you
That's
guys are trying to your mission is to help serve people and find the best value that they can, not just the mediocre one, not just the average one. So,
that's it.
yeah.
That's it. I'm like, we can't in good conscience like charge you money to build something we don't believe in. We just won't
100%.
do it.
Love
There's a ton of other shops that are willing to do that. Like, and if you want me to call some of the people and be like, hey, talk to them,
Yeah.
I'll hook you up.
It's like a bad mechanic. Well, I think that guy over there, I think he could just hammer that out for you, you know?
Right. They'll be happy and they'll charge you $200 and they'll be happy to do it.
All
Like,
right,
no
all right.
problem.
Fantastic.
And I would say the other thing too is that, you know, we've got the automation, the integration, some of those interconnected pieces of it, but we're also bringing very, very specific and deep expertise in the human resources, people analytics space. And so we're coming with a semi-standardized data model, right? Like that's part of our value proposition to you is that we don't have to start from scratch to figure out how to get the most out of the data you have. The challenge for a lot of places is that the way the data is organized, because they have these different applications, is going to be different from business to business. But the baseline model you want to use for the analytics, that's fairly consistent if you know what it is. We know what it is because we built it, we've researched it, we've put the time and effort into cultivating it, and we're happy to share that with you. We just also have the expertise to pull your data out no matter where it is to make it, you know, sort of fit into that model
Right.
as a starting point. That's an enormous also sort of potential value, I think, that goes above and beyond the automation integration piece. It's really understanding that baseline model, that structure, and some of the limits, you know, left and right limits and boundaries on it, and we bring that as well.
Well, I love that, Zach. Thank you so much for telling me a little bit about Eljun today. And I want to just let the audience know that this is a highly, you know, what am I trying to say? There's a group of highly educated combat veterans who have experience doing what they do and build a best of breed business in service, of course, built to serve their clients and their community, of course, right? This is a unique business in my perspective because I don't see a lot of businesses starting with the mindset of serving their community or serving their customers to a degree where, like we started with the conversation with Legos, right? It doesn't matter how big or small, you have to then treat everybody with that same overarching vision for your business, which then lives on and really becomes the brand that lasts generations, right? Like I think how many of us have played with Legos? Think about we're in 2020 now, but think about 2040, 2045, 2050, right? What's Eljun going to be then? How pivotal can it be to businesses who have taken the initiative to go with somebody like you and transform their business? And so, you know, so glad that they did because they were set up for the future and all the things that potentially could come. So again, I want to thank you so much, Zach. If there's anything else you'd like to go over before we end, I can do that now.
Nope, I think that was good.
Cool.
For sure. Look me up on LinkedIn if you haven't already. And another quick shout out and thank you both to you, but then also to Lego and everybody on LinkedIn who was happy to kind of engage and reshare that story. I'm glad it's something that resonated with people.
Thank you so much, Zach.
All right, thanks.
Bye.